iHeart, and on Odyssey. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Amy, as you know, I'm a Hobbesian when it comes to life, that it is filled with continual fear and danger of violent death, that the life of man is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Although, unlike Hobbes, I agree that is the case with or without a central government. And so, why not bring more people into this world to share the misery, the brutishness, the nastiness with you, like you've done with your boys, Peyton and Eli. Mm-hmm. Well, it turns out that fewer and fewer couples are doing that. We've gone from baby boomers to baby doomers, as our next guest, Madeleine Kearns, writes at The Spectator. Madeleine Kearns is a contributor to The Spectator as well as National Review, and she's here to help us understand why couples are putting the planet ahead of parenthood. Madeleine, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So, this whole AOC, the Earth is going to collapse like a dying star in the next decade or so. She's got young couples of childbearing age believing this, does she?
Well, it would appear so, certainly from the polls. There's been a recent poll done in Lancet, which is fairly reliable, suggesting that 39% of couples feel hesitant to have children due to climate change. The reasons that they give for this are twofold. There's the explanation that it is simply too dangerous to bring children into the world, or too miserable. It wouldn't be fair on them. And then there's a rather different argument that children themselves are little carbon-making machines and contribute to the worsening climate. I don't find either of those particularly persuasive, but seems to be in the air these days.
Yeah, I know. I remember talking to some moms who said, I'm not having more kids because I'm just going to fill up the landfills with diapers. Like they were that concerned. I said, well, there is a cloth option you can still use.
We're going to have to get rid of seniors, too, based on that standard.
So what's the craziest excuse you've heard for people not wanting to have children?
Well, I find this itself sort of crazy. It lacks, in my view, a sense of perspective. Certainly, if you look at the broad sweep of history and all that our ancestors have had to contend with, be it political injustices like slavery or women not being educated or basically being the property of their husbands a few centuries back, to things like famine and plague and sickness. I mean, I don't think most people living even 100 years ago or 200 years ago would have really expected to live into very old age. They certainly wouldn't have expected to have no friends or close family members die by the end of their childhood. Life now is so much better than it was back then. And I think not being able to see that suggests a sort of monomaniacal focus on the climate issue at the expense of being grateful, frankly.
Well, right. And there have always been these sort of silly navel-gazing dilettantes in society. Mm-hmm. But what it seems that you're suggesting that is different is they're actually at a point where they're having a measurable impact where we used to be able to ignore them.
Right, exactly. I think so much of this is to do with the way we talk about these issues. It used to be in ages gone by, or at least during, if you think the Second World War in the UK, or any number of really difficult shared collective experiences that societies go through, there used to be a sort of, let's keep calm and carry on. Let's get our heads down, get through this together. Life is hard, life is difficult, but you know what, it's still worthwhile, so let's keep going. Now we seem to teach young people to panic. We say the world is ending, the sky is falling in, the climate is going to be like completely ruin the planet in only a matter of years, and so we might as well just give up. And that's why you get these baby doomers. The irony, of course, is that the baby boomers were right after two pretty crushing world wars. So I don't really understand the argument, but it does seem to be having effect. And I think that is a lot to do with the way that this issue is talked about in schools and in the media, and just generally the overriding sense of pessimism and paralysis that young people are feeling.
Everybody wears a mask, everybody gets a trophy, and one ply of toilet paper per Sheryl Crow. That's we can't, we have, like, there's a segment of society that has no ability to adapt. And the interesting thing, to bring that word up, because there was a good piece in the Wall Street Journal by Bjorn Lomborg from the Copenhagen Consensus Center on this topic of adaptation, is one of the reasons the climate models, the apocalyptic ones, have been so wrong, like exponentially off, factors in the thousands, with things like sea levels, is because of human beings' ability to adapt to changing conditions, both behaviorally as well as, prophylactically. And that's just given no consideration by these political hacks, and apparently these people with no ability to critically think, that listen to them.
Yeah, exactly. Also, you mentioned critical thinking there. That's a key point of this. Obviously, the changing climate affects different parts of the world differently. And the point I was making in my piece is that we should be really, really grateful that we live in the first world and that we are able to adapt. We have the money to adapt to these things. We have the technology to adapt to these things. But also, they aren't going to affect us exactly in the same way as they are other parts of the world. So if I was a subsistence farmer in Africa, well, yes, the changing climate is basically existential for me. But if I am somebody in the first world, life is really going to carry on more or less as normal. And actually, the real issue that we're facing right now in the US and across parts of Europe is the falling birth rate. I mean, what are we going to do if we don't have enough workers to keep the economy going? What are we going to do if we don't have enough people to look after our elderly? The US fertility rate is at a record low. And it just seems ironic to me that we're talking about having less babies because of this issue, which isn't actually directly affecting us. Again, that's not a reason not to care, but it is a reason for a sense of perspective here.
Right, in terms of which actually poses the greater threat to the future of humanity and the future of America. Is it the birth rate, which is much more difficult to reverse or address, or is it some of these environmental challenges that are much easier?
Right, exactly. And it goes to, I think we've seen in so many areas of our politics just now, the way that this overriding negativity and sort of lack of gratitude for how good life is really ends up being very self-sabotaging. We've seen this with sort of talking about the terrible things that happened in America's past, but fortunately we're really far on from now. Things like racism and all the rest of it. It's just, there seems to be a movement of people who really want to self-sabotage and just focus on the negatives, excluding all the positives. And this ends up having a very damaging effect, I think, on the psychology of young people. And these are the people on whom we depend to keep it going and to raise the next generation. So it doesn't seem like a very good idea to me.
Yeah, these neo-Malthusian arguments, though, just continue. It's remarkable. And just one example of adaptation, since you mentioned, like, a farmer in Africa who's doesn't have the same technology to adapt that we do in the first world. I mean, there's always the prediction of we're going to run out of food. The population, the population bomb crowd. We're going to run out of food. We're going to run out of spaces to live, and so on and so forth. And it's just not true. And right now, even as we speak, there are companies that have hundreds of millions of dollars in venture capital invested in them that are doing vertical farming. So you can produce as much food and as good a quality of food, at least according to the proposition of some of these companies, with a fraction of the space that it takes to do that currently with traditional farming. So again, just using that as one example of innovations that people don't pay much attention to and are rarely ever included in these policy discussions about things like the environment.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It does just sort of speak to a lack of imagination generally, and a lack of an ability to sort of notice these positive things, human ingenuity and all the rest of it. It's also, you mentioned the sort of myth of overpopulation and how it just keeps manifesting itself in every decade with a different narrative. But it's especially ridiculous right now because if you look at all the predictions, it seems that global population is set to peak in 2064, and then it's going to start decreasing because like I say, we're not having enough young people. So it doesn't really hold water, and it never has. And it doesn't seem to matter how many times you point this out; it just keeps popping up again and again and again to suit various political agendas.
And do you think anything will ever change their minds?
Do I think who will change their mind?
Who are afraid of global warming and things like that, and that's the reason why they're not having children, to help Mother Earth.
Yeah,
Is there any hope for them?
Is there any hope for them? I don't know. I think it sort of depends whether they're able to sort of live in the present and worry about their own backyard. This is often the difference between sort of progressives and conservatives is that if you take the weight of the world on your shoulders and all the world's problems, you are going to really have quite a miserable life because you have limited control. So I would just say that these people should just focus on themselves and what's something worthwhile that they can do. Well, arguably, there's nothing more worthwhile that you could do than raise a family. So, but will they change their minds? I don't know. I also don't think this is all about climate change. I think there's lots of reasons why people aren't having children, and this seems like a worthy cause, so that's the one people want to talk about. But actually, there's lots of more mundane reasons why people aren't having children.
Yes, absolutely. Madeleine Kearns, she's a contributor to The Spectator and National Review. Baby Doomers, her latest piece for The Spectator. Madeleine, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. 30 years have passed since Justice Clarence Thomas was confirmed to the U.S. Supreme Court. His tenure there has been consequential indeed. He's the court's foremost proponent of natural law, an understanding that our individual rights are transcendent and come from God. This understanding undergirds his approach to the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, powerfully informing the justice's unyielding commitment to limited government and equal justice before the law. Over the last 5 years, Justice Thomas has authored more opinions than any of his colleagues on the Supreme Court. His influence only continues to grow. And he's beloved by the scores of people who know him. He knows the names of the children of the marshals who guard the courthouse. He's mentored generations of clerks, treating them like family, and his distinctive hearty laugh rings out within his judicial chambers. May God bless this great, good, and